Today, we're talking about burnout. It's something I just experienced to a rather high degree. Learn about what it is, what it looks like whenever it hits, what we can do to help, and some things that we as gamers, or me as a gamer, because I'm going to share a lot of my experience here alongside the learning I've done to help me through these times where I'm suffering a lot from the burnout. So, what is burnout? We hear about it thrown around a lot. People talk about it a lot. A lot of times they're talking about it in like a work setting, but it's not always something that only affects people at work. According to WebMD, burnout is a form of exhaustion that's caused by constantly feeling swamped, right? So it happens when we experience too much emotional, physical, and mental fatigue for too long. And now this might sound really familiar. Like, you might be like, Vince, isn't this just stress? And yes and no, but stress plays into burnout, but stress isn't burnout. So when you think about stress, it really is, you can think about it as too much of something. Okay, so stress is too much mental pressure, physical pressure, too much demand on your time or your energy. Whereas burnout is too little of something. Okay, so burnout is having too little emotion, too little motivation, or too little care. Is when you're feeling depleted and used up. So stress might contribute to feelings of burnout, right? You might have like too much pressure in your life that leads you to feeling too little emotion, having too little care, or feeling depleted. The two definitely go hand in hand, but it is good to, understand that there's things that differentiate the two. So the thing about burnout, and this is something that like affects me a lot, is that burnout can look a lot like depression. Like depression and burnout might have similar symptoms, but they're not totally different, but they're very different in how they're caused and what you would do to like help yourself with either one of those things. So when you're experiencing burnout, it's usually related to just one aspect of your life. And so what we hear about a lot is I get burnt out at work. They're working me too hard. I've got too much going on at my job. I don't feel like I can keep up with it, or I'm not feeling very motivated at my job because they're just not using me the right way. And I don't feel like I get to really excel, in my position. And so then like, what's the point, right? That you can see that all of that is stemming from, your job. Whereas depression's medical. It's a mental illness. It is pervasive. It doesn't just stem from one area of your life. It can dominate and affect many different aspects of your life. And it can also play into burnout. Burnout can also cause depression, so that's something to be aware of too. But burnout and depression are different, just the same as burnout and stress are different. So the way that you would treat depression is not the same way that you would treat burnout, and vice versa. So if you're depressed, taking some time off of work probably isn't going to fix your problem. It might contribute to some of the help of that depression, but it's not going to like wipe it out. And conversely, in my own personal experience, it takes a little bit more than just some time off to deal with burnout as well. Like for me, I've had to take a multi-pronged approach to handling my burnout. So what does it look like? What does burnout look like when it hits? For me, it looks a lot like dread. That's one of the first things that I feel when I'm getting burnt out. So, during this time where I was taking off of work, I was dreading going to work every day. I was dreading opening up my emails, and I was dreading going to the meetings. I was dreading having to drive and to travel. I was dreading to do things that I really loved doing. Doing trainings was cool. Meeting young people and teaching them about mental health was cool. But all of a sudden, I found myself dreading doing those things because I felt inadequate. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to do a good enough job. I felt like I actually didn't know what I was doing because I was confused as to what my priorities and tasks and responsibilities were at work. I couldn't focus, and that led to greater feelings of like self-doubt and lowered my self-worth. And it just really started to compound. And that made me exhausted. So exhaustion is another thing that burnout can look like. This also led to me having a lack of enthusiasm, which is another thing to look out for when burnout hits. You start to feel like you're you're going through an unfulfilled use of your time, right? So like you're spending your time doing things, but you don't feel like it has any meaning. And it can create these feelings of hopelessness. It can make you cynical and resentful. So what I mean by that is, say, again, I'm going to use the work example. You might start feeling resentful toward your coworkers or your boss, and you might start avoiding them and not wanting to talk to them, not wanting to engage socially. You're trying to alienate yourself and stay away a lot. And those feelings build up to that resentment where you start to blame your boss for the problems that are going on at the job, blame your coworkers for the way that things are playing out because it's making you feel a certain way. So you're starting to just like finger guns, pointing fingers everywhere, trying to be like it's all these people and all these things around me that are making me feel awful. But really, you're just feeling burnout, and burnout is huge. It's not just a buzzword. It actually is something that contributes to a lot of health problems. Whenever you're experiencing prolonged burnout, it can also affect you at home. You know, like you might be so burnt out at your job or whatever it is that's burning you out that you start to pull back from work. You start to pull back from your activities that you enjoy, your hobbies. It can affect your friendships, your social connections, the way that you engage with stuff that you love. You might start feeling like you're disinterested in it. You're starting to understand a little bit now why this sounds a lot like depression, because depression causes a lot of these things too. But depression is wide. It's more obtuse. It affects a lot more things and can come from a lot more places in yourself. Whereas burnout is acute. You can usually point to the thing that is burning you out, that is the root cause of a lot of these feelings. So again, just good to keep that distinguishment in mind. So there's a few types of burnout that are identified in this article. In this article, they identify four, and we're just going to kind of go over them. So the first type is overload burnout. And this happens when you work harder and harder and eventually become frantic in your pursuit of success. If you experience this, then you may be willing to risk your health and your personal life in order to feel successful. Boy, howdy, I went through this. Definitely experienced overload burnout. I remember I was obsessed for a while. I just wanted to do so good at my job that like the way that I viewed myself was 100% through the lens of the work that I was doing and how that work was being received. And so I started feeling like that needed to be priority number one, right? Was what I was doing at work. And so I wouldn't hang out with my friends as much. I wasn't playing as many video games whenever people would invite me to. I was saying no whenever we get invited to things. And I honestly was, for a little bit, willing to work longer than what I was supposed to, given my designated work hours, which obviously was going to put added strain on me, right? But it was all because I wanted to do good at my job. I wanted to be a good mental health advocate, because that's one of my dreams, right? It's near and dear to my heart. So I wanted to work hard at it. But I definitely experienced that overload burnout. I was sacrificing my health and my personal life in order to feel successful. The second type of burnout that is outlined here is called under-challenged burnout. So this one, I mentioned a little bit earlier, very briefly, but it happens when you feel underappreciated and bored. Maybe your job doesn't provide learning opportunities or have room for professional growth, right? Like maybe there's not a ladder for you to climb, or there's no clear pathway for you to advance. So if you feel under-challenged, you might distance yourself, become cynical, and avoid responsibilities. How many people here have worked in the food industry? What, you waiter or waitress, maybe you've worked at a fast food joint. You might have experienced under-challenged burnout, because what do? Like you might be able to be like, oh, I can work up to be a manager if they need a manager, and if that spot ever opens up, but maybe it doesn't. And then you're stuck waiting tables, or then you're stuck being a cashier or cleaning the kitchen or cleaning the dining room, you know? And it sucks. Like at first it's not a big deal. You're there to earn a paycheck. You're making ends meet. Cool. But it can make you cynical. It can make you not care about what you're doing because you can't find any value or worth in it. You're not challenged in a way that makes the job interesting to you, or makes what you're doing interesting, because it's not allowing you to grow as a person. So you might be dealing with under-challenged burnout there. So we're on the third type of burnout now, which is neglect burnout. And this happens when you feel helpless. So if things aren't going right, you may believe that you're incompetent or unable to keep up with your responsibilities. Such burnout can be closely connected to imposter syndrome, which we've talked about on the channel before, which is a psychological pattern in which you doubt your abilities, talents, or accomplishments. So neglect burnout can be very well connected to imposter syndrome, but it's where you believe that, you're not able to keep up with your responsibilities because of your lack of competency. And it is outlined by feelings of helplessness. Okay, so that's neglect burnout. I felt that at my last job a lot. Like every day from like year 2 onward. And I can't even blame like the people I was working with necessarily. It was just happening to me. Like work just expanded so fast. I couldn't keep up with it. There was too much, and I wasn't the only one. Like everybody was experiencing this, even my bosses. But everyone just kept pushing through it and being like, "Yeah, it's actually not good for us. This is an unhealthy way to be, but we're just going to keep accepting new work anyway." So it never slowed down, and that feeling never went away. That's neglect burnout. And then the fourth type of burnout here is called habitual burnout. So habitual burnout, they identify here as the most serious phase of burnout. So it happens when your physical and mental fatigue is chronic. Okay, chronic means that it is prolonged, it is continuous. So you feel sad and your behavior changes. Sometimes you might cross over into depression and suicidal thoughts. And it's really important that you seek help at this stage. Like if you think to yourself, I can't remember when I didn't feel this way.
If that's happening,
probably experiencing habitual burnout. It's really important that you go get some help. Seek therapy, go talk to your doctor, reach out to your friends, family members, get support for this stuff, okay? This is something that I had to do too. I got here. I talked about this very feeling right here. I was suicidal. I had been for months, and I felt helpless. I felt hopeless. I felt like there wasn't anything I could really do to turn my situation around because I had been trying everything. I had taken the time off of work. I had slowed down at work. I had talked to my coworkers about what I was experiencing, talked to my friends, talked to my family. I was going to therapy. I was journaling. I was doing meditations. I was doing all the stuff that I knew I was supposed to do to deal with what I thought was just depression, because I'm chronically depressed. That's just the way I live my life. But those things weren't working. And you remember how I talked about earlier today where depression and burnout are different? You can try to tackle one and it is probably not going to be the right solution for the other, but the depression wasn't my problem. It was the burnout, big time. And it created a monster in my depression, and now what I'm dealing with is my depression. But it started that I think it really got triggered by this prolonged habitual burnout that I was experiencing. If you're feeling like you're going through this, don't ignore it. Okay? It can catch up with you big time. And if you don't pay attention to it and you don't work through it, it can lead to some pretty drastic consequences. I didn't want to die. I wasn't ready to check out anytime soon. That wasn't it. I was super tired of feeling the amount of strain all day long that I was feeling. And I wanted that to stop. And I tried so many things that didn't work that I didn't know that there was any other way. And that's why I was feeling suicidal. To me, that was a way out. And it wasn't anything that I had a plan for or was going to act on, but dang, if I didn't feel that all the time. And that's a really hard thing to deal with all day long for months and months on end. So we went through the 4 stages, right? Which were overload, underchallenged, neglect, and habitual burnouts. And we got this nice long list of stages of burnout. And I'm not going to break every single one of them down here because it is quite a lot, but we're going to kind of go through them. And then I'm going to point out the ones that, I might have a story about. So the 12 stages of burnout, right? The first stage is an urgent need to prove yourself. I kind of already went over that, right? I totally wanted to prove myself early on in my job. I was working really, really hard, sacrificing my health in order to prove myself. Working harder is the second stage. You feel the need to do everything yourself and complete tasks as soon as possible. How many people have ever felt that? You ever felt like you need to do everything yourself and you need to get those tasks done right away? That could be a stage of burnout. It could be the second stage of burnout. The third stage is neglecting your needs. So you think that the stress of work or activities such as caregiving is normal. You neglect your social life and look down on others who pursue one, and you begin to make small mistakes. Now, what I would say here is you don't necessarily have to look down on others who pursue one. It's not so conscious, right? Because I experienced this. I start neglecting my needs and be like, yeah, it's normal to work hard. It's normal to sacrifice my personal life to do a good job, right? Especially in the West, anybody in the States can understand this like stupid hustle culture that exists and contributes massively to everybody here is burnout. So no wonder that so many of us get burnt out and we get sucked into this cycle of sacrificing our personal needs for our work needs. I mentioned that, you might look down on others who pursue one. It doesn't necessarily look like you actively thinking like, that person's hanging out with their friends, what a loser. Now, you're not going to have that thought most of the time. What the thought might actually look like, though, is that person's hanging out with their friends instead of working hard like I am. That sucks. What's wrong with me? Why do I think that sucks? I'm glad for them. That looks nice. I'm kind of jealous. I'm kind of resentful, actually. How come they get to do that and I don't? What makes them better than me? Maybe, shouldn't I be better than them? Because I'm working really hard. I'm sacrificing this. How come I don't feel as happy as they seem to feel? That's what that starts to look like. It's not necessarily like you just look down on them. There's these feelings of envy and this bitterness that comes in with your situation and how you kind of project it onto others. That's how it was in my case, because you guys know me. I think I'm a pretty nice guy. I'm really happy for other people's happiness in general. I love when other people are doing well, but I cannot tell you how many times I've had those thoughts where I'm just pissed off about the fact that other people are doing well and I don't seem to be doing as well. And I feel like I'm working harder than they are. What's the problem with me? What's my problem? And I'm mad at them, but I'm not mad at them. I feel like I'm mad at them on the surface, but I'm really just mad that I don't have what they have when I feel like I've earned it because I'm working hard. So it's a little complicated. It doesn't make you a mean person or a hateful person. It's a natural cycle, I think, of emotion or progression of emotion that takes place whenever you're experiencing burnout. Stage 4 is more interpersonal conflicts. You have conflicts with coworkers, friends, your partner. You don't sleep well. You have other physical complaints, or you become forgetful. I didn't really have conflicts with my partner or my friends. I felt the stresses of some relationships much more prominently when I was experiencing burnout, but I definitely was not sleeping well. I'm still dealing with that right now. My bedtime has somehow made it to 4:30 or 5 in the morning, which is the worst it's ever been in my adult life. And so that's something that I'm having to work with right now. But that was one of the first things that started happening to me. And then the forgetfulness, oh my God. If you guys could see pictures of my desk, it was 60% sticky notes. And then I had Microsoft to-do lists that were reminding me of stuff all the time. And my calendar alerts were going off all the time. And I was telling people about things that were going on in my life so that they could remind me because I was forgetting everything all the time, almost immediately after I would make a commitment to do it. It was so stressful. But that was a big part of what I was experiencing. The fifth stage of burnout is a revision of values. You see things differently and begin to seem insensitive to those around you. Friends and family become secondary to your goals. How many of us have experienced this? How many of us have put our friends and family on back burner because we've got to get work done? Stage 6, denial. Somehow denial always makes its way in, doesn't it? So the stages of burnout, stages of grief, it's always there. But with denial, bitterness and cynicism creep in, and you begin to cut yourself off from other people. You become impatient, intolerant, and angry. Your performance suffers, and then you feel physical discomfort. When I was suffering from the most extreme forms of the burnout, I was cynical. I was I had all these reasons why people were out to get me. I had little patience for anything that went wrong. I felt like I was just getting triggered left and right. Something could go wrong whenever I was filling out paperwork and I would just shut down. It was bad, man. Most recent example of this, I went to file for unemployment after I left my job, right? Still feeling burnt out, still trying to bounce back from that. I filed for unemployment and I got through the whole process. It took me ages because I was trying to write up like a thoughtful recollection of events that led up to me leaving my job. And I was being fair and respectful and all of this and that. And so I finally did it. I was like, yes, I'm done. I'm good. I felt proud of it. I let Jen see it so she could review it. She was like, it looks good. Great. I went to send it off, went and confirmed everything. And on the very last stage of the process, it told me that my session had timed out and I lost all the progress. I had to start from scratch. I just couldn't handle it. Something about that just broke my brain. I was so angry in that moment, and it was over something small, right? Like I absolutely could have just sat back down and went through it again. It wasn't that hard. It wouldn't have taken me as much time because I already knew what I was going to write, but I couldn't remember anything that I wrote either. And I couldn't handle it. And so I think I sat here at my computer for 30 minutes trying to work myself back up to getting to it. And I just couldn't because I would just hit this point over and over again where I was just so mad. And I was so worked up, I had to go lay down. And then I just cried for like an hour. And then after that, I just laid there for another hour. Like I just hugged a pillow because I just couldn't handle it. Whatever I was feeling was just like, I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't process anymore. And that sucked. Like it's almost embarrassing to admit it because that's like, again, it's like, dude, it's just paperwork. Like just do it again. Not that big of a deal. But it affected me so strongly. If I could have done that differently, I would have. I literally couldn't do anything else. It was like in my mind and the way that I felt, it was that or like break my keyboard because I was that mad about it. And I'm not the type to lash out. So I went to lay down and try to let those feelings subside. And then I took another crack at it later that night once I had calmed down and everything and got it done. And it was fine. But I was feeling that, man. The intolerance, the impatience, the anger, I was so deep in it. And that came along with that stage 6 of denial, because I think people were also telling me around that time that I might be experiencing burnout. And I was like, it can't just be that. It can't just be that. It's got to be something worse. It's got to be something wrong with me, you know? So yeah, it was rough, but that's my experience with stage 6. Okay, stage 7 is withdrawal. Dealing with others feels like a burden. You get angry if someone criticizes you, and you may feel disoriented or helpless. You might also try to self-medicate with alcohol or illegal substances. Listen, real talk. My want to have a drink has been concerning over the last 8 months. I write about it in my journal where I'm just like, I need to make sure that I'm keeping that in check. I have a rule. My rule is if I have the thought, I need a drink because I've had a rough day, I don't drink because I'm drinking for the wrong reasons. I'm drinking because I'm trying to get away from bad feelings and I'm trying to replace them with alcohol. And that's just a really slippery slope that'll lead you down a path of alcoholism or worse. I've seen it happen a lot. I've experienced it whenever I was younger, and I just don't want to go down that road. But I've struggled with this in the past when I didn't understand this and I didn't have that rule for myself. But over this last 8 months, that desire has been loud in my brain. And illegal substances is also something that people can turn to for self-medication on this too. For me, it was pot. Smoked a lot of cannabis. You know, that was kind of like one of my go-to things. And I try to keep that out of my home for the most part nowadays because I just didn't like, once I kind of had this wake-up call where I was just like, I don't like how much I rely on this. Even though it is medicinal and it can be very helpful and effective, it can also be abused. But my point is that you might try to deal with those feelings that seem so out of your hands by self-medicating with alcohol or substances. So be aware of that. And then stage 8, behavioral changes, apathy sets in. Nothing seems to matter anymore. You avoid additional responsibilities. Stage 9 is depersonalization. You lose your sense of identity, seeing yourself only as the vessel through which work and responsibilities are completed. Holy crap, just reading that just hit me right in the heart. It closes off by saying your life feels meaningless and you begin to neglect your health. Never mind that you've probably already been neglecting your health. I don't think this is where it begins. I think you've already been neglecting your health. But god dang, man, I had a very real extended period of time where I was just like, my life is about the daily grind of work, and it doesn't mean anything else because that's all I have the energy for. That's all I have the time for. So what else even am I? Leaving my job was stressful because I thought, who am I without that job? I've put so much of myself into it. Who the hell am I if I'm no longer statewide youth and young adult mental health advocate? What is left? I didn't have an answer to that. I thought I had some answers to it, but I didn't believe them. That absolutely contributed to my feelings of suicidality as well. That depersonalization, it's rough. Stage 10, feeling empty. Exhaustion, anxiety, and panic start to set in. I was definitely dealing with that. I was always exhausted, always anxious of what people thought of me, whether my life had meaning, whether my tasks amounted to anything, or whether I was capable of achieving any of the responsibilities that, were being asked of me. And I panicked about that often. I would get like really worked up about it. And then you have stage 11, which is despair. You may have feelings of self-hatred or depression coupled with suicidal thoughts, which we covered that already. The last stage is total burnout. This last phase of mental and emotional collapse requires immediate care. Written here is mental and emotional collapse. It's not normal for a person to react to paperwork not working out the right way by losing 2.5 hours to hugging a pillow and trying not to lash out at your inanimate objects. It shouldn't also lead to a person just being completely depleted and drained for the next 5 hours of their day. Losing a day to that sort of thing isn't normal. It's a sign that something else is wrong, something else is going on. When that's happening, you should definitely seek immediate care. You should get some help for this. I remember talking extensively with my therapist every week. It helped, but it wasn't enough. Like I needed more. I needed to do more to treat it. This can happen to anybody who is overwhelmed by anything in their life to a chronic degree. Okay. It could be school. This happens a lot in relationships. Okay. So look out for that there too. Whether it's romantic or maybe you have a toxic friend. Keeping up with them is very, very draining on you. You can get burnt out. So what can help? I'm going to give you my list, my personal list of things that helped me and are still helping me and that I use on a regular basis that actually kept me alive and kept me sane even when I was dealing with the highest degrees of my burnout. Taking breaks, getting some rest, taking time off, super important. If you're from the West, just the notion of me telling you should take some time off makes you cringe. Why? You feel bad for being someone who has to take time off, right? What's wrong with you? It's a shameful thing to do. You're not working every day like every other honest American. What's wrong with you? No, dude, that sucks, okay? Give yourself some time off. It's not a bad thing to do. If you're working a full-time job with any sort of benefits, you probably have paid time off. It's tempting to just bank them up all the time, but they're there to use, dude. Please use them. Building yourself island days throughout the year is super duper important. And that was something that I wish I had learned sooner, because when I started doing that, it helped me a lot. And I don't think that I actually would have survived as long as I did in my job if I hadn't started doing that in the first place, which again, I might have started doing it too late, but it kept me going. The second thing that I would do is set some boundaries. So I have never had this experience before because I never worked a salaried position, but even when you're working hourly, I think this can still happen where like sometimes, depending on who you work for or depending on what you're doing, you can feel strong-armed into devoting more time than you should be devoting every day to that thing. It's caretaking, if it's your job, if it's your relationship, whatever's causing you burnout. There are situations we find ourselves in where our boss asked us to stay late and work late today. You don't have to do that. Now, I understand everybody's situation may be different. You might feel like, Vince, you don't get it. I have to do this or this and this will happen. Worst case scenario in that situation, maybe it's time to look for somewhere else to work. You owe that to yourself. I'm not saying it's a quick fix or a simple solution. I'm saying it's worth trying to explore that avenue if that is what you're having to go through on a regular basis. For me, 5 o'clock, the end of every day, 5 o'clock, I'm done. You want me to do something else? If I get an email that comes in at 5:01 to asking me to look at something, I'm doing that tomorrow morning. I have to be done, or I'm going to sit here for 2 more hours and it's going to be 7 o'clock. Jen's going to be asking me why I let my dinner get cold, and I'm going to be all frumpy and frustrated for the rest of the night. Like, I did that to myself. I don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. All right. Set that boundary. You got working hours, adhere to the working hours. Don't come in early. Don't stay late. If there's something you're trying to accomplish because it brings you a personal sense of satisfaction, that's one thing. But if you are feeling burnt out, or you're worried that you're becoming burnt out, this is one way that you can try to get ahead of it. All right. Set some boundaries for yourself. It worked for me. It helped me a lot. Make sure that you're doing something you enjoy daily. Okay. This is important. You remember that stage where they're talking about like your life is dedicated to work? If that's what you wake up and feel like your life is about, you need to work some other stuff in that you enjoy. I made sure, for instance, that like I played some video games every day. And now there are some days where I didn't do this, so I shouldn't say every day, but I tried to make sure that I worked in some game time every day because that's something I like to do. Does that mean I was sitting there and playing games for 4 hours every day? No. Sometimes it was just 30 or 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Whatever it was, I tried to work it in because there's something that I could look forward to, something that I know I enjoy. Other times it was like I wanted to watch this show. I made sure I watched one episode of that show a day, or I wrote a song or something like that, right? And it was something that was just for me. Just work something in every day that's just for you because you enjoy it. The fourth thing that I did is work mindfulness into my routine. It was just the other day I was talking with my therapist about this, and she asked me, "Are you practicing mindfulness? And are you meditating?" And I was like, I used to meditate on a regular basis, and I don't really anymore. She's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, but the other day, like I did go outside like with my cup of tea, and like I was sitting there and I was just kind of like watching the trees. It was only for maybe like 15, 20 minutes, but like I was just kind of like looking at the trees, and I was there with my tea, but I had all this other stuff that I needed to be doing and whatever. Like I just wanted to get outside and get some fresh air. She's like, "You were meditating." That's meditation, dude. You don't have to be sitting there in complete silence in like this antechamber of a room where there's no sound coming in at you and it's just you and your thoughts. That can be meditation, but that's not all it is. Meditation is literally just you being in a space and being present in the moment. You can do it for 5 minutes a day. Another thing that you can do to help, reach out for support. Get some support, man. Talk to your friends about it. They might not experience the same exact thing that you are, but chances are they've experienced some form of it, and they're going to be like, "Dude, that reminds me of," and they're going to tell you. There's something that happens in that moment where you have this solidarity with another person who's experiencing a similar thing, and it changes the way you feel about yourself. Open up to your friends. Open up to your family. Let them know that you're going through this so that they can talk to you about it. You can talk to them about it. I can't tell you the value of being connected to other people during that time where you're struggling. It makes a huge difference in the outcome. It makes a huge difference in the amount of hope that you feel about your situation. You isolate yourself, it makes it so much harder. Please don't do that. Please make sure that you do connect with people around you. The last thing I have here is changing your environment. Changing your environment can change your mindset. And it doesn't fix your problem. It doesn't all of a sudden make you not burnt out. But changing your environment can change your mindset, the way that you frame what's happening to you. For me, that looks like stepping outside on my balcony to go and look at the trees. Okay, getting outside of my apartment is a big deal. I think a certain way when I'm in my office because I have been conditioned to do specific things when I'm in my office, like working. Changing that environment, going outside is different. I start to think differently. Going for a walk in the park and sitting down on a bench and just people watching, looking at what trees are blooming or what's going on with the grass or what kind of cars are driving by or what's happening in that moment. It helps me to reframe everything. And I have different types of thoughts. I come up with different types of solutions. I think about my problems in different ways. Changing your environment can be a really helpful tool for dealing with your burnout. I do want to hit you with some things because I'm a gamer and a lot of y'all are gamers too. There were some games that helped me deal with burnout during this heavy time. Here's just a couple of them, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it helped me so much. It was something that I knew I was going to enjoy every time I sat down with it. I love listening to good music. I love admiring art and looking at pretty scenery. I love waxing nostalgic over things that I've loved before. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was great for that because that's totally all that game is, And I love immersing myself in a good storyline. That game just checked a lot of boxes for me. Unicorn Overlord was another game that I was playing during this time. That one helped me because I was dealing with a lot of this like overthinking and agonizing over like things I was doing wrong or could be doing better. As soon as I started playing the game and like getting into the battles, because there's so much going on tactically, so many different combinations you can work out with your characters, it just got really complex, and that would just take over. Like that's all I'd be thinking about while I was playing that game. And that was great for me because it was giving me a break from the thoughts that were just circling. Like, oh my God, I'm not working. Oh my God, I'm not good enough to work. My bipolar sucks. My depression sucks. Like all of a sudden that wasn't there anymore because I was just like, I have to figure out how I'm going to take that bridge so that I can capture this outpost. But there's an archer that's standing up there that can shoot all of my guys every time I engage in battle. How do I deal with them? Super cool game that definitely helped me out. And last but not least is Helldivers. Holy crap. That game is such a freaking rollicking good time. It's hilarious. The lore building is fun. It has such a smooth multiplayer experience, minus the friends list system, which still sucks butt. However, it's forgivable because the rest of the game is so solid. That game has been getting me through. It's just a great way to unwind and connect with people that I care about. Shout out to CJ for hooking me up with that and helping me out. Video games are freaking medicine, dude. Like, I get it. They can be abused like anything, and they can definitely be a form of addiction, but I will die on this hill that video games are one of the greatest boons to mankind. Play is so important in this world and to our well-being. What better way to play sometimes than with a video game, man? They have saved my life more than once, so thank you, video games. Thanks for coming and learning about burnout with me and hanging out and sharing some of your stories alongside the discussion as well. I think that that's been super helpful to help paint a picture what burnout can actually look like, more so than just what these articles tell us and what it says on paper.